I went home and I just couldn't stop thinking about her.
When you're in country and you're sitting still and idle, that's a bad sign.
She no longer had a heartbeat. She wasn't breathing. That was the first one on the chest. I started compressions first.
Need advocates. We need people that are going to hold companies, government, hold these people accountable.
Welcome to the Heroes Debrief. Thank you for joining us as we sit down for part 2 with John Riley as a 7-year Army veteran and 20-year retired police officer. We are wanting to make sure that you are aware that some of the content is for mature audiences only, and we encourage discretion. I'm your host, Jordan White, U.S. Navy veteran, current working paramedic, and founder of Hero Services, and we will be continuing with John right now. So when I was active duty, I was not in a combat-oriented role, but I wound up seeing a multitude of different cultures, third world nations, that sort of thing, or whatever. And I think getting into the first response world as a veteran that has experienced some of those other cultures and those other societies or whatever, that's a kind of a good primer to get you a little bit not, I don't want to say okay with the idea, but more accepting of some of the things that you're going to see or whatever, because yes, you are absolutely right. Some of the things that you wind up seeing in the field stateside, most people wouldn't even fathom that was something people would do to each other.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's not, we're not talking about bad accidents and things like that. I'm talking about, assaults and domestic assaults against your spouse or against your children. And it's just crazy.
Yeah.
So the police academy kind of prepares you with the bookwork stuff, but the psychological stuff and you've got to wade through it yourself as you experience it. Yeah.
I don't know how it would ever wound up coming into fruition or whatever, but did the Army have something where you could enlist without a particular role? So for the Navy, you could enlist undesignated, right?
Yeah. No.
So I think that the first response world should wind up trying to take some sort of model of that. So you don't wound up enlisting, or you don't wound up signing up into the first response world as a paramedic or a police officer or a firefighter. You come in as a public safety official.
Yeah.
And you wind up taking some time to basically job
Yeah.
shadow into different entities, and then you wind up deciding what path that you're going to want to take and get into whatever academy. But now you're taking these individuals, and there could be a process to getting them warmed up to what it's like being out on the road. But getting through some of that stuff right from the get-go, so people are a little bit more aware of what it's like. Because I know on the EMS side of things, manpower is an issue. Trying to get people to wind up coming in and wanting to become an EMT or a paramedic is really difficult. Law enforcement this day and age is the same. So.
Well, I know that they've started implementing as part of our recruiting program and all that, and I think they started doing this even before I got out, was making sure people, potential recruits, went on ride-alongs so that they were introduced to the reality of what's out there. So I understand where you're coming from, to give people an opportunity to really experience this. Is this what you really want to get into? Doing a CPR on a CPR dummy is very different than doing it on someone with their eyes glazed over looking at you.
Yeah.
And it's very, so.
Fluids pouring out
Right,
everywhere.
so
Yeah.
it's very, very different, and so making sure that we had people go on ride-alongs to experience this, I think is important and helpful. And I don't know if EMS does that, hey, go for a couple ride-alongs with an ambulance, with a truck, a couple nights, just to get a feel for it. Now, it's kind of tricky, because on any given night, like in Grand Rapids, we could have a busy week, and potential recruits are going to be exposed to things, but I don't know how busy you guys are consistently are in EMS, because I have from time to time given people ride-alongs and nothing freaking happened. It was just a
Yeah.
slow night. But, it's kind of
Yeah.
rare, but,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's days where it's like you wound up running a shift or whatever, and it's you go and do a lift assist, and then you're taking somebody into the hospital because they wound up having something along the lines of a common flu, and then another person might been not able to get their prescription medication. So it's all like this mundane stuff or whatever. And then when you have a third rider, it's just kind of like, yep, this is what we do in the in-between time. If you want to stick around until something fun happens, who knows when that's going to be, but, hopefully sooner than later. So it's ride-alongs can be a difficult process, but again, like, how do you showcase some of those things without getting people, without the exposure? Like, there's certain things that you just can't replicate.
Right, no, exactly.
Yeah, so.
No easy answer, I guess.
There isn't, but, so you started out into law enforcement, just in a cruiser?
Yeah, I was patrol, and actually ended up deciding to stay patrol pretty much my entire career. Every time I had the opportunity to consider taking a promotion or whatever, something would happen, or I would get involved in something that would just remind me of, I guess, how much benefit and how much of a difference I could make, boots on the ground, on patrol, as opposed to, I guess, basically promoting out of it. I worked nights pretty much 90-some% of my career. I preferred working nights. It literally is a different world. A little bit busier, but day shift also had its busy moments too. But I just preferred working nights. So I was, for 20 years, almost 20 years, basically, night shift. I was on days for very briefly, 2003 to 2005, 2006 or something. But yeah, night shift pretty much the whole time. I just preferred it. I tell people it's because I like seeing my red and blue lights reflect off the buildings and cars around me. So.
It's so, that's how I make sure that they're on.
Right, that's exactly right. Exactly right.
What my partner will be like, why are these people not pulling over? Are our lights on? Yeah, we're seeing reflections into the sides. We're good.
And oh my gosh, that happened more often than not when I was on day shift. I couldn't tell my lights were on. I would leave a traffic stop or whatever and forget to turn off my lights, and I'm wondering, why are people getting out of my way?
Right. Yeah.
And then you got to play it off. Oh, I got to hit the gas and go.
I got important stuff to do.
Oh my God. Oh Lord.
So there's a couple rules with my truck is like, there's enough emergency lights on the scene by the time that we get there that we do not leave ours on.
Right.
Ours get turned off because if we're transporting, if this is a lower priority patient, I'm going to be the one that's going to be driving us, and I will forget to check the lights, and we're going emergent, not emergent, all the way to the hospital. Yeah.
Doing 35 with emergency lights on. Right?
Everybody's just honking at me.
Hey, what's up? Yeah. Yeah, good times, man.
So, is there any significant experiences that you had working the road? Any calls you want to talk about?
I think, a lot of times people will ask me, again, well, sometimes kids would ask that you have to shoot anybody, and you don't hear questions like that very often anymore, but people would ask that, what's the most exciting thing you've done? I will say that the closest I ever came to actually shooting anybody was in, like, I think 98, 99. I was only still a rookie cop. Late afternoon, ended up being, it was a teenager. I turned the corner off a main road, and there was this teenager that I had contact with, so I recognized him, and he's walking along the sidewalk with his girlfriend. And the time it took for me to turn, I'm making my turn, I'm straightening out, I pass him, he's waving his right hand, and I only catch a glimpse of something in his hand, and as I pass him, I'm like, what the heck, was that a gun in his hand? I flip a U-ey, I come back, and I pull left a curb, so I pull over to the left side of the road. By now, his hand's down by his side, and they're just walking normally, and I pull up a little bit ahead of them, so that as I open the door to get out, I'm stepping out so that I'm facing him, and I'm saying, hey buddy, how you doing? Was that a gun I saw in your hand? Conversational, and I'm still off balance, getting out of the car, and he just very casually lifts the front of his shirt and pulls out a gun. And in my head, I remember thinking, oh shit, he's got the drop on me, because I'm still off balance, I'm stepping out of the car, and a lot of things go through my head. His hand's coming up, and I'm thinking, okay, it's going to hurt, but I have this vest, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let this punk-ass kid take me out. And I sidestepped as I'm drawing. We had Sig Sauers in those days. I sidestepped to be a moving target, and his hand's still coming up. My hand's coming up. And just as I take up slack, because we had a double action only Sig Sauer in those days, as I'm taking up the slack and I'm bringing the gun up, my hands are coming together, and again, we're about this close. His hand's already up in my chest, and I'm thinking, oh man, it's going to hurt, but I'm going to kill this son of a bitch. And his hand keeps going up, and he goes, it's a toy, click, and he pulls the trigger a couple times, just as my hand comes up. And I stood there looking at him for just a split second, and then, I'll be honest with you, I slapped the shit out of him. I just reached over there and I hit him and knocked him down to the ground. His girlfriend started yelling and screaming and crying, because I think she realized how close he came to getting killed. And ultimately, nothing came out of it. It was just a toy. He didn't actually aim it at me, threaten with me, try to rob me or anything. It was just a toy. It was a blue, I remember I took pictures of it for my report. It was originally a blue plastic cap gun that somebody, him or someone, I don't know, had spray painted black, but you could still see it was the original color. And
do you know why you drew it? Like why you drawed it out?
Because I asked him if that was a gun in his hand, and so he was showing me it was a toy. It's just a toy. Click, click, click. But in the years since then, I have had my gun on other juveniles. And as a matter of fact, I just had this conversation with someone not too long ago that as a police officer, I think I had my gun out on juveniles more often than I did with adults.
Is it because they don't listen?
They know that juvenile laws don't do diddly squat. And so, we see that we see what's going on in the world around us right now. Right now, you can Google it. 12-year-old just tried to carjack someone and got himself killed. They listen to what we call, backyard lawyers, jailhouse lawyers. They think they know the law better, but one thing is very consistent. The juveniles, they recognize that nothing's going to happen to them, literally. There's no real consequence until something really, really bad happens, and then, maybe they're going to be charged as an adult. But up until then, the two, if you go back and look at the news right now, the two young men who ran over and killed a retired police chief are heard on radio joking with the officers. Well, I'm going to be out here. I'm going to be out in 30 days. What do you guys think? What are you guys tripping over, man? They know that nothing's going to happen to them. And then there's videotape in the courtroom laughing, smirking at each other. They don't care. And but it was a retired police chief. They had run over two other people. He's the one who died. Now they're being tried as adults, and I think they're 16, 17 years old. But the point, even when I was in, juveniles learn, and they know nothing's going to happen to them, and so they do things, and they put their own lives at risk just because there's this sense of nothing's going to happen to me until something tragically does. It's very disappointing. The adults that are doing stupid crap today, I dealt with them as kids, 20 years ago. They just developed this life habit of just doing the wrong thing at the wrong time, and it just becomes their lifestyle. And so it's very disappointing and very, very scary and very dangerous for police officers who find themselves in these potentially really bad situations with teenagers because this is why and I don't know if how it's going to get any better anytime soon, but this is why you can constantly and consistently see people act a fool towards police officers because they know the media is going to lift them up as model citizens or they're going to win some type of settlement. There's no consequence for this type of behavior. There's no consequence for breaking the law and stuff like that as juveniles or anybody really. And so you're going to see this constant, if they were so convinced that the police were going to kill you, why do you keep doing things to put yourself, quote unquote, at risk? And they just continue to do things, and it's real dangerous situation. But juveniles, yeah, the closest I ever came to shooting anyone was with a juvenile. That doesn't mean I didn't have the weapon out many times. It's just that in terms of psychologically thinking, this is it, I'm squeezing the trigger, it was with the juvenile.
We want to take a moment to thank our principal sponsors. These companies have supported Hero Services from a more general perspective rather than sponsoring a singular event. Window World, Paul Davis, and Bathworks have all committed to supporting Hero Services with their events as well as our various programs that we offer. Not only do these companies support Hero Services, but they have various other charitable donations as well. Please take the time to wind up looking into these companies in case you need any of your home renovation needs.
So that must have been pretty intense. Like, how did that affect you and the rest of your career? When did that happen in your career? Was that early
Again,
on?
that was early on. That was like 1998, 1999. It was very, very early on. A lot of major things happened early in my career that stuck with me. That was one. And again, even as the years went by, I had my weapon out many times. But, in my memory, it seemed like most of the times for the situations we were dealing with, it was always dealing with something with juveniles. And that's one of those realities that the police academy and all that doesn't necessarily prepare you for. It doesn't prepare you for the reality of what man will do to his fellow man, sometimes his own family members, and dealing with the possibility of maybe having to shoot a juvenile. And yet the news is full of juveniles shooting each other and shooting up schools and shooting up gas stations. And so it's a very, very real threat. And these kids, they just don't care. But that's because the way the system is set up, and they just don't face any real consequences. But some of the other things that was a real shocker to my psyche per se is literally trying to help and rescue someone, and they turn on me. I remember responding to a domestic very early on. I got there first, and I could actually hear the assault in progress. I could hear him yelling and screaming, and I could hear the thumps as he's really whooping on her. And I look down the street, and I see my partners not too far away, so I'm going to go ahead and boot the door down. I'm going to go ahead and kick the door down, because you're trained and taught to just slow down, wait for your backup, right? You don't want to just unnecessarily rush into a situation and find yourself potentially getting hurt. But here was a situation where I could stop an attack in progress, and I don't know what's going on, but she definitely sounds like she's getting hurt. Kick the door down, rush in, partner rushes in, we grab hold of him, we take him into custody, sit him down in the living room sofa. I take her to the kitchen, and she's crying, she's disheveled, she's marked up, she's got very distinct handprints, fingerprints, finger indentations, marks, the bruising around her neck. And I asked her if she's okay, and she's like, yeah, thank you, I'm so glad you're here, you saved my life. And I said, all right, hang on a second, I got to go to my car real quick. Now, in those days, we had Polaroid cameras, and what we were asked to do is take evidentiary pictures right then and there. The bruising and the injuries are the freshest right there in that moment, right? So in the time it took, literally, 30 seconds for me to run out to my cruiser, grab the Polaroid, run back. I'm raising the camera up to take a picture of her injuries, and all of a sudden she's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing in my house? Do you have a search warrant? These are hickeys. Nothing happened." And all of a sudden she is just full of hate and anger towards me. And I remember standing there looking at her just dumbfounded. I didn't know what to say. I just saved you, lady, from a butt kicking. And from looking at you, I can tell that you are really, really getting hurt. But as the years go by, I understand now the psychological hold that some of these abusers and manipulators have on spousal abuse victims. And I understand now that oftentimes after the police leave is when it could be really worse for them, especially if they talk to law enforcement and all that. So I get that now. But at that time, I was just absolutely dumbfounded that this person who I literally just rescued, who I have no doubt I rescued, was now turning upon me and making me out to be the bad guy. And, but you kind of get used to that. And you learn very quickly, and you have to learn very quickly, that you can't rescue everyone, you can't solve everyone's problems, you can't resolve everyone's problems, and that oftentimes people took decades to get to where they're at. And the best you can do sometimes is just put a Band-Aid on it or be a listening ear or whatever, and drop them off and move on,
So did you find in the most of your experiences where the individual flipped on you like that was from like a domestic abuse situation? As it like you're trying to help and then they get upset with you for helping? Pretty much?
No, I think there were other circumstances and other situations where there was such a animosity towards law enforcement in the first place that they didn't want to talk to us. I do remember a guy, my buddy told me about it, a guy bled out and died without telling the police who had shot him. We knew, my buddies and the guys who responded to that call knew that he knew the shooter. And my buddy said he's looking at him going, "Look, man, EMS is rolling up, but right now, who did this? Just who did this? If for no one else's sake, your parents' sake, your friends' sake, your family's sake." Guy said, "F you," and then he bled out and died. And so there will be times when there was such an animosity and a feeling towards the police that I think situations were made worse by that type of attitude and so on. And in those early days, I'd be very, very frustrated with it because I want to help. But you just come quick. You just have to accept. And again, this isn't something they necessarily teach or point out in the police academy. You just have to accept. You're not going to save everyone. You're not going to fix everyone. You're not going to resolve everyone's problems. You can't rescue everyone. You do the best you can and then move on. Try not to get too emotionally connected. And it's very difficult as human beings, especially empathetic, compassionate human beings, those of us in first responders who do somewhere in our DNA want to help. It's difficult and challenging not to necessarily be emotionally involved and connected in some way. Either you have a child of that same age, or you have a favorite aunt that same age, or whatever. There's going to be something that this family has or is going through that you can relate in some way. So that makes it very personal. And that adds to the challenge of being able to disconnect and compartmentalize it so that you can just stay focused on what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I got one more story that but really highlights, and this story actually highlights and emphasizes the fact, and this is what I tell a lot of first responders and all that, this is proof that you do in fact make a difference even when it doesn't seem like it. I came around the corner and observed a domestic assault in progress. In the middle of the day, this guy had a pregnant girl by the hair, bending her down. He's walloping her on her over the top of her head and the back of her shoulders and all that. And we take him into custody, and she's visibly pregnant. Take him into custody, and within moments, she is just all in my face, full of hate and vinegar, just screaming, calling me names. And I remember one of her friends coming up to her and comforting her and bad-mouthing the police. The damn police can't mind their own business. And I remember her stroking and moving some of her hair out of this girl's face. And this girl is just full of hate. And again, a situation of where I literally just saved her from being beaten down in the middle of the street like a dog. So I waved her over. I wanted to have one last word with her real quick before we all went our separate ways. And my buddies took her baby daddy to jail. And I said, you're right. He's going to be out in a few hours, and you guys are going to kiss and make up, and you guys are going to go on like nothing's happened, like you guys have probably done many times before. And I looked at her and I said, but I personally feel that you deserve better than to be beat down like a dog in the middle of the street. And I know for a fact that for tonight, while he's in jail, you and your baby will sleep peacefully. So you do what you got to do when he comes back, but at least I know that for tonight, you and your baby will sleep peacefully. And that was it. I didn't about face walked away with her cussing me out and so on. About a year or so goes by. I get a subpoena, and this is back in the day when the police department and the courthouse were in one building right now where the DeVos Center is now, the corner there at Bridge in Michigan, Bridge and Monroe. And I get a subpoena, some Hispanic name, I don't recognize it, like assault and battery, 4th degree, whatever. This guy, from the charges he's facing, he's going to do time now. And so I'm walking to court that morning. All of a sudden, this pretty Latina girl comes running up and jumps in my arms, and she's just hugging on me. And this other lady, who looked old enough to be just her sister, runs up and starts hugging on me. And this first girl says, "That's my mom." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, wow." And then she starts showing me baby pictures. And it turns out that she was that pregnant girl that day. And she says, "You know what, Officer Riley, thank you for getting involved that day. Because you were right. In the silence and peace and quiet of my apartment that night, it hit me that I deserved better than the way I was being treated." And she started to do what she had to do to break away from him. It didn't happen overnight, but the point is, what I shared with her and what I said to her clicked with her. And so we were both there as potential witnesses, because he had just badly beaten up his current girlfriend, and he ended up taking a plea deal and started doing time. But I share that story with people and young police officers and people who want to go into law enforcement. The way the culture is right now, there seems to be so much hate and anger towards police officers. Please understand that even though it may not sound like it or look like it or feel like it in the moment, you absolutely are making a difference in someone's life.
Yeah, that's pretty profound for all first responders, because law enforcement, more to a T in the regard and to the context that you're discussing, but like in the first response world, you don't see like the aftermath, like
Right.
for like an EMS, like we transport these sick patients to the hospital, we drop them off at the ER, we do our turnover report. Depending on what system you're working in, you might render treatment and aid for, anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. Or, some more rural areas, maybe longer than that. But for our more direct area, 5 to 30 minutes is about how much time you're going to be with the patient. We drop them off, and then we don't see them again.
Right.
And then sometimes you wind up seeing them a year after the fact running around in the grocery store, and it's like that patient, that person looks
Real
way
familiar.
different,
Yeah.
different, but yet very familiar from last time I saw him. And I hope that all first responders have that experience to be able to wound up staying with the career long enough where you can start seeing some of those individuals that you've helped in the past, because it is going to be years after the fact when you wound up eventually crossing paths. I feel like, to see it happen on a
Absolutely.
regular basis.
And I tell people that very, very few careers and jobs on this planet give you the opportunity to actually know you made a difference in someone's life. It's not just another 9 to 5. You know you made a difference. You whether saved their life or you gave them an opportunity to get away from a bad situation. Very few career fields on this planet give you that opportunity. And if you stick around long enough, you can see some of basically the fruits of your labor. I remember coming across a lady at my church. I didn't even recognize her, but she came up to me and said, "Hey, John, how you doing? You probably don't remember me." It turned out that a number of years before, she was one of our crack whores. She was one of our prostitutes. And she just remembered how I tried to help her, And when she finally was able to get rid of that stuff and started attending our church, and I haven't seen her since, but she was there this one day. And you know what's validating and affirming is I did not recognize her, and she did not have to come up to me and say hi, but she came up to me and said, "Hey, just thanks." And you know, again, it's those little things, those little nuggets that I tell all the first responders. You are making a difference. It may not look like it, and it may not feel like it, but there is someone out there, trust me, who appreciates you and the things that you do and the things you say. And I know how frustrating it can be to be dealing with a drunk in the back of your truck, because I've seen it. And I even called ambulance to come take a drunk off my hands. I know how challenging it can be, but I also know, having talked to people later, that the kind words they heard from the officer or the kind words and attitude and demeanor from the truck crew, the ambulance crew, can make an absolute world of difference. And so I tell people, look, man, you're dealing with another human being who's may have had a little bit too much to drink and all that, but just remember, at one time they weren't an alcoholic. At one time they weren't a drug addict. Something happened in their life, and they just started making bad decisions. But just be nice. Just be nice, you know?
Yeah. So coming up into what year did you retire?
2015.
Okay. So you've been
Almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Time flies, man. Yeah.
So, unless you have any more like specific calls, like talk to us a little bit about like how the culture has changed, because the military you came from and the military I came from, in comparison to what we assume the military to be right now,
Right. No.
are all three different things. And I would assume over 20 years in law enforcement, you probably saw some significant changes over that career as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's almost that's almost another rabbit hole. But I do remember talking to a young man who went into the Army maybe 10 years ago. He initially went reserves or National Guard, and I talked him into going active duty. I said, man, this is an opportunity for you to travel the world. Look, if you're going to do it, do it. Just go in and just tackle the world. You know, again, education, medical insurance, education opportunities, opportunity to travel the world. Just do it. So he goes in. And he ends up staying 6, 7, 8 years or something like that. But I remember him coming out, and this time, the last few years, I mean, he's really disgruntled. And I remember sitting down with him, and he goes, John, I'm telling you right now, it is not the same Army that when you were in. And he wasn't able to go into too many details. We didn't have that type of long talk at the time. But I started beginning to hear, at least from him, and I don't know what the different changes were, but it makes sense that culture just different changes, because your military is going to be some reflection of the culture behind it, because that's where the people are coming from. And he says, man, it's just not the same, dude.
So I heard that when I was in.
Yeah.
So I was in between 2003 to 2008, and most of the senior guys that I was stationed with or whatever, they're like, this isn't the same Navy that when I joined and stuff like that. And they came from an era where, you know, you were messing up too much. You wound up going behind the tool shed and
Here's that.
yeah, we're going to handle this right now because you're not messing up with my liberty or whatever. And there wasn't so much of that stuff while I was in or whatever, but like I was still in a generation where you did what you were told.
Right.
Like, you know, there was no like repetitive requisitions on getting stuff done. It was you do what you're told, and I'm going to ask you once, and if not, there's going to be repercussions type thing. I don't know what it's like now. I've heard varying different stories. From a recruiter that's an active recruiter right now. He says that boot camp and stuff like that is the same as it's always been, and I don't necessarily know.
I don't know. Yeah.
But I've heard other stories where it's like, I mean, for some boot camps, like, you know, there's no marching in formation anymore.
What?
Yeah, right, yeah. So I do think that there's been some significant changes Yeah, I mean, I'm sure depending on the branch and that sort of thing, but
I don't know how we can continue to be the most deadliest lethal fighting force on this country if we're so offended or so concerned about offending someone's feelings, telling them to get up at 2 a.m. to do radio watch.
so
It's just,
yeah, and I mean that comes across in the first response world too.
yeah.
Because again, for the people that know me, I'm a fairly direct person.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I ask you to do something, I'm expecting some sort of result or an update as far as why things aren't being accomplished, whatever. Just it seems the whole world, military and first response world, gets very agitated about being direct. And I think that is not a good position to be in.
No,
I mean,
no.
if we have to be so careful about not offending anybody, and people can't just take it on the chest and be like, oh, I have responsibilities I need to take care of, and this individual is saying that I do, and I'm going to be held accountable.
Yeah. Well, you know what, part of the problem right there is some of these young people who's letting their emotions and feelings get hurt, they're not being taught to be more resilient. And so it's not necessarily their fault. They're growing up in a culture where they're being taught that people need to worry about your feelings. And if you do get your feelings hurt, then it's your right to lash out and act a fool and be loud, rude, and obnoxious. You know, instead of just sucking it up and recognize and stop taking things personally and just do what you have to do. It's a real problem with this younger generation coming up, and everything's emojis and emoticons, and have no people skills, no verbal interaction skills, and then all of a sudden they find themselves in some type of normal, natural, human friction type situation, and their feelings are hurt, and then they blow up, and it's an overreaction to what normally would have been taken care of, you know.
This is something that just popped into my head. Do you think that the police academy and boot camp taught you people skills?
No. I know along those lines, the military, no, not when I was in. And I know that the police academies now are putting more of an emphasis for people skills, de-escalation training and knowledge and skills and stuff like that.
I think-
Not when I was in.
I think the military boot camp has a certain context of maybe people skills, because I would imagine that you were in a division like I was, you know, going
Yeah,
through boot
yeah.
camp, probably, you know, 60 to 80 guys. That's how many that was mine. And we were not, I mean, it was 60, 80 guys, so it's not like we were this really tight, close-knit crew,
Right,
you
right,
know,
right.
but at the same fact, we all knew each other, and we all knew, like, don't screw up, else we're all getting punished
Right,
for it,
right.
and stuff like that. And I think that there's a certain like layer of people skills that kind of was taught in boot camp, where it's like we're all accountable, we're all there for each other in a certain context, and that sort of stuff. And I guess I'm kind of rambling here, but it's just an interesting thought that there's
Well, the
a version of it anyways.
I don't know about communication skills, but you're definitely taught the team concept. If one person screws up, everyone's going to pay for it. And there's an expectation that the team, as a unit, will let this person know, hey, don't act like this or don't say this or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
there's an element of that. But in terms of learning how, and there's an expectation that when you sign up for the military, because even when I went in, there were some people who just absolutely fell apart at boot camp. And it was nowhere near as stressful as I imagined it was going to be. You know, your mind's your most,
Yeah.
you know, dangerous enemy per se. It was nowhere near as challenging as I had made it out to be, what I thought it was going to be. But I saw some people completely fall apart. How do you talk to those people to try to encourage, motivate, and inspire those people? So there's communication skills that weren't necessarily taught, but natural leaders would step up and try to help each other out. However, there were some people that just completely fell apart, and I remember looking at them going, why the hell did you sign up? What did you think was going to happen? You know, so.
Yeah. I just, regardless of how the military has changed and stuff like that, I hope that in that context where you have the individuals that would fall apart in boot camp and are obviously not a good fit for the military, I hope that they're still getting processed out. Like, because in a sense, like, I understand the question, like, why did you join? But they were probably 17, 18 years old and didn't know, you know?
No, exactly right.
And then
First time away from home.
At least they got to boot camp and it ended there. And I think that regardless of how things have changed, I hope that the military is still holding on to that intent with boot camp, where it's like, you know, you can enlist, you can wind up coming in, you can go through boot camp or whatever, and we will find out whether this is going to be a good lifestyle for you or not. I would say in certain aspects, the first response world currently has, and probably has always fallen short. Because I feel like individuals are just thrown out to the first response world, and it's like sink or swim, good luck, pat on the back, there you go. Where it's like, I don't know what the result of preparing individuals mentally and, you know, physically and like educationally coming into the field. I think that all three entities have some version of kind of excelling in a certain component, but it all needs to get meshed together.
It does have to be meshed together, and a lot of it also is on the individual. They need to recognize that they have their part to play. Someone is not going to just hand it to them or wave a magic wand over their head and so on. You have your responsibilities to do also to make it work together in your life and to put it together. There seems to be such a lack of teaching and encouraging and inspiring people to be self motivated and what's the word? I'm drawing a blank. Self-initiating and independent. And the moment that something starts to go wrong, they don't have the ability to just kind of brush it off. Some road rage incidences that were so absolutely avoidable had one person just let it go. We had a couple situations, I'm aware of situations in fast food restaurants, absolutely blown up into physical violence over stupid shit like moisture on outside of the cup. When we just had one here in the Wyoming, Michigan area where a guy went into a Wendy's, went through the drive-through, lady handed him a cup, and there was some moisture. I don't even know if it was, you know, because sometimes when you hand them a cold drink, there's some moisture on the outside because of a cold drink in warm weather, or if it was in fact part of his Coke along the side. But whatever it was, there was moisture, it upset him, he parked the car, went inside and started demolishing the inside of the store. over moisture on the outside of your drink. And where the heck did that come from? You know, and unfortunately you see more and more of that. And this guy was in his 30s. So that means in 91, 92, you know, he's just a kid. So he's growing up in this culture of, if it doesn't go your way, your feelings are hurt, let people know loudly. You know.
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't really exposed to that that
we
culture.
No, we were not. And see that, and that's the benefit. You know, children who did not have parents try to be their best friend had a higher chance of growing up to be more productive and self-reliant and all that. But I have seen what happens when parents try to be their kid's best friend, as opposed to, I'm your parent, these are the boundaries, these are the rules, these are the regulations, okay? But instead, you know, they just want to be their best friend. I've seen that because the kids don't grow up not understanding the word no, depending on their family dynamics. If their parents are their best friend, chances are they're getting everything and anything they want. They haven't heard the word no, because as a best friend, how can I be your best friend if I'm not giving you everything you want and letting you get away with things?
Yeah.
So.
Well, what about like the mental health kind of stuff?
The mental
Have you-
health stuff.
How have you seen any like things we should be doing? Any changes that you've seen over your career as far as like how
Yes.
people are responding to things? All of that.
The basics that I learned when I was in and when I was younger, from the military onto the police department, stress management and taking care of yourself, very, very critical. I know that over the last few years, because of unfortunate and I think unnecessary suicides and all that, has brought another spotlight to stress management and mental health issues and stuff like that. It is very, very difficult, just like this, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I try to tell young first responders and people going into law enforcement, you do make a difference. If you feel like you make no difference and your life matters not and nothing you do means anything, where's the hope? Why keep going? Everyone hates me. I got in trouble at work, so my work hates me. And your mind, it's your mind. Your mind will start going a million miles in the wrong direction, and then ultimately something tragic happens. So over the last few years, I see a stronger emphasis on trying to help people deal with that. And I see a lot of it because young people aren't being raised to not let their feelings get hurt in the first place. And all of a sudden, they're young adults that have never heard the word no, or they've never dealt with heartbreak, or never dealt with disappointment, and all of a sudden their feelings are hurt, their heart is broken, something happens in their life that you and I would just grin and bear it. It's devastating to these young people because they just haven't been raised in such a manner for them to just be able to effectively deal with it. And so now we're back to basics: exercise, eat right, drink water, talk to your friends, go on vacation. The basics have never changed, but now the emphasis is just that much greater to try to teach people, look, it's going to be hard out there, and that's why I tell people, don't go into to law enforcement or be a first responder or whatever thinking you're going to get rich or have people always pat you on the back and give you a high five. That's not what's going to happen. Chances are you're going to be ridiculed, spit on, blamed, defiled, and blah, blah, blah. And you just have to believe in yourself. But if you don't believe in yourself, the first time something happens that just rocks your world for whatever it is, all of a sudden it can just start spiraling in the wrong direction. So the mental health component hasn't changed in that the basics are still there. That's why they're the basics: eat well, exercise, drink water, talk to your friends, spend time for yourself, vacations and stuff like that. And I tell people who are going into law enforcement and so on, talk to your family about it. There's such a rule of thumb. Well, I'm not gonna talk to my parents. I'm not gonna talk to my girlfriend, my wife, because they don't get it. You're right, they don't. But what you can do is talk about the funny stuff, the things in and around that incident that you can talk about without necessarily getting into the gore. And that way you're still processing it, and that way you're still getting it out of your system. So I always encourage people, talk about it. Talk about it. You don't have to go into the specifics. You can say that for the locker room or at 2 a.m. when you guys are just sitting there in the cemetery waiting for a call. That's when you can get into the nitty-gritty. But the next time you're at a family gathering and someone says, "Hey, how'd it go last week at work?" "Oh yeah, it was great. We had this crazy drunk. We had to drive him, and he was singing La Cucaracha or something." There's things that you can share that don't have to be really traumatic to a civilian.
Yeah.
But that way you're processing it, you're running it through your head again, and you're getting it out of your system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so I know that you and I have talked about like an individual's network, about how don't exclude yourself to only hanging out with other first responders. And how, but at the same fact, make sure that you have that group of other first responders to,
Absolutely.
you need both.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, see, here's one of the reasons why I said that, because I can think of some people that was in the department when I was there that were grumpy, and truthfully, if you went to them to talk about what was troubling you, they would be such a downer, you probably want to go jump off the roof. So you've got to be careful about who among your colleagues to attach to, because there are, in any career field, there are grumpy people, and there are people who are retired on duty. They should probably just leave, but they're there, they feel stuck there, they have to because they need the medical insurance or whatever. So when you surround yourself with colleagues, just be selective too, so that you don't inadvertently connect to someone who's already depressed and angry and resentful, because all that's going to do is feed into what your brain is doing, and then it could be a bad thing.
But so what other things outside of the first response world are you involved with?
I'm heavily involved in my church, and that's actually what helped keep me grounded, was because I was involved with my church. I didn't always just hang out and do police, law enforcement, first responder functions. I was involved with there. I made friends with my neighbors. It helped me stay grounded. And especially, talking about juveniles, when a majority of juveniles I was dealing with at work were up to no good and foul-mouthed and just loud, rude, and obnoxious, I could go to the church and I could see a group of young people who are making an effort to do it right and to stay straight and so on. And yes, I'm very well aware some of them will go and make bad decisions. We're human beings too. But generally, as a group, there was a group of people trying to hang out with good people and, feed their head and their minds with more positive things than what's going on out in the streets. Mm-hmm. So for me personally was my hobbies. I'm a private pilot. I like fly fishing. All those basic things. I used to run half marathons, so I did a lot of things to try to stay healthy and take care of myself. Again, you've got to take responsibility for yourself. I can't emphasize that enough. Save for the future and take care of yourself, because before you know it, like we were just saying, it's been almost 8 years since I retired. My gosh, time flies. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, exactly right. Just that. Take care of yourself. And stay grounded by having friends outside of first responders, get involved, volunteer. That's another critical component, I think, because we can find a certain level of self-worth and accomplishment by volunteering somewhere and just knowing you're helping. It doesn't have to necessarily be the soup kitchen downtown or anything like that, but just volunteer. Whether it's at church or the next time the fire departments or the EMS has got some type of drive going, toy drive for Christmas, just volunteer. Just go and do something without expectation of payment or anything. Just do something for someone else, The mental health aspect of it is just absolutely critical.
Yeah. So with your church, you also have a business going on, right?
Yes. In 2016, I created a business called Gentle Response, and that's from the Message translation of the Bible of Proverbs 15, verse 1. A gentle response diffuses anger. So what it is I have I'm a business, I have a team, and we specialize in conducting very dynamic, realistic conflict de-escalation training seminars. And we work with churches. It began as a ministry teaching church staff and volunteers on how to more effectively and successfully handle someone who's being loud, rude, obnoxious. And then from there, these people would go back and tell their businesses. And here I am, 6-7 years later. My team and I travel around the country. We work with churches and businesses, law enforcement, state agencies. I just wrote a book geared towards law enforcement. It's on Amazon on ebook and paperback. Practical de-escalation for patrol. Mastering basic concepts, tips, and techniques for police officers to just more effectively and successfully handle certain situations that I'm familiar with, because I've been there and I saw how some people did it wrong, So I've got all that going on. Yep.
So your book's available on Amazon?
It's on Amazon, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm currently writing a book for geared specifically for church staff and volunteers. Again, all about conflict de-escalation, how to more effectively and successfully de-escalate a situation, verbal de-escalation.
Okay. And then I know that you wound up coming out to the Heroes Ball that we had this past December.
Yeah, almost a month ago.
As a guest speaker. Well, talk about a little bit what you do as a guest speaker, what you talk about, what kind of speeches you have.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, yeah, thank you. I find myself speaking more and more at different conferences and things like that. And a lot of times people, most of them have been in the de-escalation world, organizations that want to hear a little bit more about basic effective de-escalation concepts and tips and techniques. And so I'll speak about that. What was unique for you was just basically to come and just talk about the first responder world, and again, I'm glad I had the opportunity to try to remind the people there, hey, you do make a difference.
Yeah.
That's the big one right there. Just because we all go through stuff, and especially for those who are still active duty and all that, you're a human being. You are going to have bad days, good days and bad days. It's just the way the world turns. So on those bad days, I want you to take a moment and remember you do make a difference. You know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I go around speaking at different conferences. I went from last year, 2021. Wait, this is 2024. 2022, I spoke at, yeah, I'm losing track of
That's
time.
a really long year.
Right. In 2022, I spoke at maybe 1 or 2 conferences. In 2023, I spoke at 6 or 7, yours being one of them. I mean, it just blew up. I guess, and it's word of mouth. And now I'm set up for several speaking engagements for the first half of this year, 2024 already. So it's
Nice.
yeah, no, it's been a real blessing, and I haven't had to do much marketing other than it's been word of mouth. It's been me, with my social media platforms. Everything these days is social media driven. So
Yeah.
yeah, no.
Do you want to tell how people can get in touch with you for any of that?
Yeah. My webpage is gentle-response.com. I have a YouTube page. Just look up Gentle Response, de-escalation training. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all the big ones, right?
Right.
And what I do, especially on my YouTube channels, I'll grab these situations that I see in the news or on social media, and I'll talk about how conflict de-escalation knowledge and skills would have changed the outcome, most likely.
Okay.
The last video I just posted a couple of days ago was a situation at a McDonald's in North Carolina. The manager in training felt disrespected, so she calls her husband, who happens to be a pastor. She tells him to come take care of this guy. So this pastor grabs his car keys and drives over there, never once taking a moment to slow down and think things through. And he gets there and starts whooping on this guy and tries to put his head in the deep fryer. So I talk about how some conflict de-escalation knowledge, skills, and some self-discipline would have definitely have changed the outcome of that. So now this pastor was arrested, she's lost her job, and the ripple effect is that this guy's church cannot forget that they saw this pastor lose it. The ripple effect of these decisions by people is there's a lot more than just in the moment my feelings are hurt.
Yeah.
And people don't get that. So anyway, that's what I do on my YouTube channel, and that's what I do on my TikTok and Facebook. I talk about how different things have probably would have evolved very differently if 1 or 2 people had just taken a moment to take a breath, just think things through. I know it's not easy, but it's what you got to do.
Yep. So to wrap up, we kind of ask this of everybody. What do you have to say to newer recruits or people thinking about getting into the military, getting into enlisting in the Army?
I encourage all young people to give the military a chance. I absolutely do. I'm a strong believer in just the opportunities it gives you in terms of learning and developing self-confidence in yourself, learning a job skill where you're being paid to learn that job skill, opportunity to travel. To me, it's just a win-win. And all you have to do is keep your head on straight, show up when you're supposed to show up, and just don't talk back. There's a lot that you can do out of the military. Going into law enforcement and first responders and stuff like that, you have to absolutely believe it's a calling. Don't do it just because great-granddad was a cop. Don't do it just because your neighbor is a cop. Do it because you really feel a calling and a need and basically a calling to do this work, because you are, the way the world's going right now, you are going to get a lot of hate and condemnation and so on. And you've got to believe in yourself, because it will help you deal with those bad days that you are going to have as a human being. You are going to have days where everything just seems to suck. But and that is where I come in and say, hey, I'm telling you from experience, you are making a difference. And just carry on, keep your head on straight, and just drive on.
What about to the general public?
To the general public, take a moment and consider that these young men and women absolutely care enough to risk their lives for strangers sometimes, and to give up their Christmases and to give up their Thanksgivings to be available and to help you, Joe Schmo civilian out there. Just take a moment and appreciate that these folks are out there doing it, because we don't see you doing it. You're sitting there running at the mouth about how this and that could be different and all that, but these young men and women are doing the best they can with what they have, and a little pat in the back would be a lot better than just a face full of hate and so on.
Yeah. You got anything else that you'd like to pass along?
No, just want to thank you for the opportunity, and again, really, just want to end with just reminding everyone in the law enforcement world, in the first responder world, you do make a difference. Even if it doesn't sound like it, feel like it, or look like it in the moment, you absolutely make a difference. Just hang in there.
Well, we want to thank you for coming out and joining with us. It's been a good conversation. So this is actually round 2. I think our second round went a lot better than our first one did. So thanks again for coming out.
Thank you.
And we'll wrap it up there.